What up, y'all? Mike RipZ here. This is the ThaRANTulas video clip edition. Gonna be breaking down a couple topics, shit that I'm interested in. I want to share with y'all my take on some of the shit I talk about in the podcast and in my music and just general geek, nerd shit, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, today I'm talking about HP Lovecraft and the Cthulhu Mythos. It's become very popular, even more recently than it used to be. I remember back in the day, I got into this in like the early 90s. My dad put me onto it. I think he first remembered about it because we were visiting. At the time I lived in Texas, and we were visiting. We came back up and we went to Forbidden Planet in New York City, and they had a really dope bust of Cthulhu, one of those, painted statues, and it was crazy, and he loved it. And since then he started getting back into it. He remembered it from when he was a kid and all that, but since then he got back into it, and he started putting me onto it. I remember the first time I read it, I brought it to 4th grade, like in Texas. They had some kind of reading time or something like that, and they told us to bring in whatever book you wanted, and I brought HP Lovecraft. And I think those Christian conservative right-wing motherfuckers down there were like, what, this fucking devil worshiper brought this shit to class? But that's a whole nother story. Lovecraft was born in Rhode Island, and he resided there for the majority of his life. He was his only child. From what I could tell, his parents were weird as fuck. His dad was a traveling salesman, and his mother was from a rich family. I don't know what her profession was, but she ended up in a mental hospital from what I've read, learning about his family. And she did not want to have contact at all from Lovecraft. There's kind of conflicting reports on this, because some people say that she was really protective over him, and she, always wanted to have him in sight, didn't want him to be away from her or anything, and then people say she didn't even ever want to touch him. But who really knows? But you can see a strange childhood, whatever it may have been, is maybe what molded him to write the way he did. Now, Lovecraft is known as the, godfather of modern horror, I'd say. Him or Edgar Allan Poe, which he's greatly influenced by Edgar Allan Poe. They are some of the most notable writers of this time period, although Poe comes before him in the late 1800s. Lovecraft was born in 1890 and only lived till I think it was 1937, and he wrote from 1917 to 1937, or around that time. I don't know when his last published thing was, but he lived in Brooklyn at one point too. He lived in Red Hook, and he writes about it. There's one book, there's one of his stories. All of his shit was short stories, by the way. He never wrote an actual novel. Some of them are considered novellas, like the one I have right here, which is peep this. It's At the Mountains of Madness. This is a long short story. It's like 100-something pages, and it's one of his best. I love this one. I truly recommend it. Guillermo del Toro was a big fan of this dude. Was always supposed to make a theatrical version of this. Never got made. Got close to being made a couple years ago when, what's his name? Your boy from Aliens, the director. What's his name? He did The Abyss. He did the Terminator 1 and 2.
James Cameron?
James Cameron. I got my cameraman here. He's got to help me out sometimes. Fucking James Cameron. Yes. He was going to be an executive producer on the film version of this if Guillermo was ever actually going to make it. Didn't end up happening, fell through. There's a couple reasons. Guillermo del Toro insists that it is a period piece, so it would take place in, I believe, the late 1920s or early 1930s. I can't remember. I've read it a couple times, but I don't remember I think 31, if I'm not wrong. Anyway, so never going to get made, or maybe it'll get made as a series because he was so successful with that thing, The Strain, on FX. I don't know. This is one of the anthologies from Lovecraft, just a simple one. You can get this at any fucking bookstore anywhere. It's got 4 other stories. It's got Mountains of Madness, The Shunned House, The Dreams in the Witch House, and The Statement of Randolph Carter. I've read all these. Lovecraft has over 100 short stories, which at the time when he was out were mostly all published in pulp magazines. He did not have success throughout his life. He was always a struggling writer. After he died is when he became more popular and people started getting more into him. And over the years, up until recently, now they have a convention for him. I believe it was in Denver. I might be wrong about that. But there's a convention for Lovecraft, and there's been adapted a couple times. Of course, The Reanimator is probably the most known adaptation of his, which is not really an adaptation of the story because they modernize it and it's more like a B-movie. Although I love it, and I love, as I've told this story many times, the theme song to it. My boy Sub-Level, Filthy Rich, Richie FX, made a beat out of the theme song to that. That's fucking dope. But Reanimator's one, what is the Dunwich Horror, there's a theatrical version of that. It's not good. I watched it back in the day. It's a real shitty 70s B movie that really almost has nothing to do with the first original story. But One thing about Lovecraft and all these stories I keep referencing here is that they were all tied into this thing called the Cthulhu Mythos, which Cthulhu is this creature that rules the city of R'lyeh, which is the place that's, at this point, when all these stories are coming out and getting written, buried underwater. They were the Elder Gods. They're known as the Elder Gods. They ran the earth when it was still chaos and lava, fucking all that kind of shit before there was any actual humanity. And Cthulhu was one of the powerful ones. There's Yog-Sothoth, there's Azeroth. There's quite a few of these gods that are in all these books, and the city of R'lyeh is in all of them. And I believe in Mountains of Madness, they actually end up going to City of R'lyeh. But Cthulhu is this giant monster with bat wings and like a humanoid body with claws. It also has a face that's like an octopus with tentacles, which, if anybody's into D&D and you watched Stranger Things last season, they had the Mind Flayer. That is kind of a ripoff of Cthulhu. Again, you're seeing Lovecraft's influence. It's all over the place. It's in every kind of media these days. It was in D&D back then. Cthulhu's adapted over and over again. And the connection in a lot of Lovecraft stories... Right here, I got the anthology of everything he ever did. It's a big-ass motherfucker. Check this shit out. Alan Moore wrote the introduction in this, too, by the way. But, the thing that kind of links the human world to the Cthulhu Mythos, the Lost City of R'lyeh, and all that is the Necronomicon, the book written by the Mad Arab. And that's in all these books. That's been used a lot, and it's made very, very famous by, I know, one of y'all's favorite, Evil Dead 2, and, you know, Army of Darkness, and Ash vs. Evil Dead, the series, and, of course, the comic books of Ash, and all that shit. Army of Darkness, everything. The Necronomicon's all over there. His influence is in everything. It's in, like, the John Carpenter movies, the Guillermo del Toro, monsters are always kind of based on him. You've seen Pan's Labyrinth, a lot of that was straight out of Lovecraft. The first story that was notable, I think it's his first that ever got published, was Dagon. And that's about this, like, reptilian man kind of thing that crashes in a pond in a small town. Almost all of them take place in Providence, or in the area of New England, Providence, and shit like that. Adaptations besides film ones, there's been a couple comic book adaptations. There's one where it's Lovecraft writing and these things are actually coming to life. That was on Dark Horse. There's some just adaptations of Call of Cthulhu and, you know, that one, the fucking Mountains of Madness. One that was very interesting, bringing up Alan Moore, he did one that was Providence was the name of the comic book, and it was like a 6-issue series where it's this gay dude, and he's in the closet, of course, because it takes place in the 30s, and he's doing research for a newspaper, and he goes up to Miskatonic or whatever, the university in Providence, in the Rhode Island, Providence area, and he sees all the creatures from the Lovecraft shit. By the way, as always, I forgot to mention, transmitting from the loft in Brooklyn, as y'all can hear outside, the fucking cops are doing whatever the fuck their bullshit job is. Fucking cocksuckers. Anyway, gotta let that pass. These fucking pieces of shit. Regardless, Lovecraft is looked at now as one of the most influential and important horror genre writers. There's really not many more than him, I would say. Edgar Allan Poe. He was a contemporary of Robert E. Howard and Clark Ashton Smith. Robert E. Howard, of course, very famous for creating Conan, Solomon Kane, my favorite character, Sailor Steve Costigan. I'm going to do one of these videos about Robert E. Howard in the coming weeks. But, Providence, as I was saying, the Alan Moore story, that one's a really cool adaptation. And I'll tell you right now, to finish this up, my 3 favorite HP Lovecraft stories. The Shadow over Innsmouth is definitely one. I'll give you 4. Shadow over Innsmouth. The Color Out of Space is my 3rd favorite. Then Call of Cthulhu, I would say. Then the Mountains of Madness, in my opinion, is his best. It's his best work. It's his deepest. It goes the deepest into the material and the Cthulhu Mythos. It also references, actually, I know he references Clark Ashton Smith in it. I believe he references Robert E. Howard, or the area Robert E. Howard wrote about in the Conan stories. It was kind of a crossover, which you'll hear me mention this a lot in these videos. I really love when writers go back and forth into each other's worlds, or like a writer like what Quentin Tarantino used to do with Band Apart, where it's something along the lines of Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs and True Romance and From Dusk Till Dawn and even Killing Zoe. Those are all in the same universe. Kevin Smith, of course, did this with View Askew with the first 6 movies. But on that note, let me know what y'all think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you like my top 3? Let me know in the comments below. Peace, y'all.